We're live. Welcome to In Vivo, our live question and answer session with San Antonio's candidates for mayor. I am Greg Jefferson, Metro Editor of the San Antonio Express News, and joining me is City Hall reporter Molly Smith. We'll be talking today with John Courage, who was the very first candidate to announce for mayor. Courage is a retired, and it's weird, I'm talking to you and looking at you, so I'm just going to look at them for a moment. He is a retired public school teacher who has represented City Council District 9 on the North Side since 2017. Now, you must have many, many questions for Councilman Courage. Please pick the sharpest one or two, write them in chat, and we will get to as many of them as we can over the next hour. Councilman Courage, welcome.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Molly. It's a pleasure to be here to talk with you today.
Great.
Well, we want to start by asking you, what's the big problem you want to solve if elected, or the big opportunity you're hoping to exploit? In other words, why are you running for mayor?
Well, those are kind of two different questions, but I'll answer them this way. I'm running for mayor because I've been dedicated really my whole adult life to public service. And it started when I joined the military. It continued when I got out, when I worked for St. Peter's and St. Joseph Children's Home. I later was elected to the Alamo Community College District Board and was part of the team that developed Palo Alto College. I later went on and was teacher for 25 years here in San Antonio. And then when I was getting ready to retire from teaching, I decided that I wanted to continue public service. My predecessor, City Council District 9, Joe Cryer, decided he wasn't going to run. So halfway through my school year, my wife said, you know, you always want to do public service. You've run for office and served a bit. Why don't you go ahead and run for his position? And I did, and I was elected. And then I was reelected. So I've been elected to office 4 times. And part of the reason why I'm running for mayor is really because I don't feel like I'm done. I don't feel like I've done as much as I can for the entire community that I believe I have the ability to do. And a lot of people in my district have asked me to run, have told me they thought I'd make a great mayor. You know, I have an ego like anybody else. And so, you know, sometimes you let your ego be your guide. But when people come up to you and say, hey, I think you'd be a great mayor, we want you to be mayor, we want to support you, it just reassured me that I had been doing well by the people in our community, and I felt like I wanted to continue to do that. Now, what do we need to do? Well, you know, I think we need to stick to the basics that a city is responsible for, and that is making sure that public safety is taken care of. That's making sure the infrastructure in the city is operating right, to make sure that we address any special needs. What are the needs we have today? Well, you know, housing, I think, is a big issue in our community that the city should take a stronger role in. We've got education as a continuing challenge in our city. And I have to say, I hold the state accountable for not stepping up to the plate. And if they don't, then the city may have to in different ways. You know, I think that it's my responsibility to go ahead and work hard for the entire community. As I said when I was first elected to city council, a council person is more than just a council person for the district that elected them. You're a council person for the entire city, because almost every decision we make down at City Hall, one way or another, affects the lives of everybody in our city. And that's how I've served as a council member, and that's why I feel like I'm ready to continue to serve as the next mayor of San Antonio.
You shocked political observers back in 2017 when you were elected to Council District 9. It's the most conservative of the 10 council districts. And at the time, you were viewed as a progressive. You had the backing of Our Revolution, a political organization that Senator Bernie Sanders launched. You've since become a moderate. For example, you oppose using city dollars to fund out-of-state travel to access abortions. Did you change your politics to match your district you were representing? And if elected mayor, would your politics change once again?
Well, let me say, I don't think I've changed my politics, but I've also come to understand the complexity of city government and the role of city government. I was like everybody else in my neighborhood before I ran. I thought I understood how city government works or how it should work. And I had my opinions and I expressed them. And some people might have categorized me one way or another. But I really thought of myself as somebody who always wanted to do what was best for most of the people in our community. And so that's how I've handled being on a city council. I look at it from every perspective I can. And I ask questions. And I think that is probably the most important thing a council member can do is ask questions from their constituents, from the community, from the city and its different departments and its leadership. Because the more questions you ask, the more you kind of understand what people want and expect and what they need and how we can resolve those things. So I think I'm pretty much the same person that I was when I first ran. But I've come to understand if we're going to make government effective for the people in our community, you need to know how it works. You need to be prepared to work with others, collaborate, cooperate, communicate. And I think all of those were things that helped me really broaden my perspective on being a city council member. And that's why I think I'm prepared to continue and be the next mayor for the city.
Right now, for example, you oppose using funds from the Reproductive Justice Fund, which is this $500,000 pot of money created in last year's budget for all kinds of initiatives, potentially including paying for out-of-state travel for women seeking abortions who can't obtain abortion services in Texas. They'll go elsewhere. You do not want to use the fund for that purpose, correct?
Yes, you're right about that. I understand that we've established the fund and it was through council effort from several members who wanted to do more to support women, right. Going through pregnancy and facing some tough challenges. And I don't have any problem supporting that concept. But I don't believe the city should be involved in using city tax dollars to pay for a woman to be transported out of the state of Texas to get an abortion. I think once we start getting into more and more of the city tax dollars supporting some of these very divisive issues, these social policies that are very controversial and don't really serve a city purpose, then we start getting into a situation that I think makes the city and, of course, the council more divisive.
Right. Is that a position you would have taken in 2017?
Not understanding how the government functions, I might not have taken that stand then.
Mm-hmm. So what is it about? What is it about the intervening time that changes your mind?
Well, I think
clarify that for me.
Understanding what is the responsibility of city government. Okay. And I think it's different than it is when we get into some of the social issues, particularly abortion. Mm-hmm. I think we're crossing a line that is more divisive than inclusive, and using city taxpayers' dollars that come from 1.5 million people to do that, I think is outside of the obligation of the city.
All right. First question from our viewers. It's a good one. How can the performance of the San Antonio Police Department be significantly improved without increasing their share of the city of San Antonio's budget? It's a good one and a tough one.
Yeah, I've always felt since I've been on council and have gone out to the police academy. As a matter of fact, I've taken citizens from District 9 to the police academy to observe what the training is like. I've felt that we need to make a greater emphasis on some of the testing that we do before people come in, some of the ongoing follow-up kind of testing, counseling support that we can provide police officers. And that we need to go ahead and make sure that they're as committed to the interest of the public after being in there for 2 or 5 or 10 years as they were when they first started. I think everybody who enters has an idea that they want to serve the community. But I think once you serve the community, you start recognizing some of the conflicts, some of the challenges, some of the difficulties that you face as a police officer. And I want to ensure people still have that same commitment later on down the line. So I think we need to work more with enabling them to continue to serve the way they committed originally. That's not going to take a lot of money, but it is going to take a commitment from the city and from the Police Officers Association to work together to benefit those police officers and keep them sharp and committed and doing the best to their ability. And it's not everyone who faces all of these challenges in a way that makes it harder for them to serve, but there are many who do go through those situations. One of the problems in our city is that we don't have enough mental health care for all of us in the city in a lot of different ways, whether you're a public servant or whether you're a person who lives in a community, whether you have an issue that bothers you or not. And I think that that's part of the process we should keep in mind for all of our public servants.
Your campaign website says you want to, quote, work to enhance our police force by increasing neighborhood patrols and emergency services. Does that mean that you think the police force should be larger?
Well, yes, and I've been an advocate of that from day one. When I first got on the council, my first year or two, I advocated for adding more police officers to our staff. And I've advocated for that all along. And the first year I was on, I think we had about 2,200 and a few odd members of the police force. And then over the next 3 or 4 years, we added another 100 and then another 200 or so. But I still didn't feel that was adequate. I'm glad that we did a real strong analysis about 2 years ago and recognized that we needed to increase the police force in our community. And we've decided to do that by 15%, which is 360 additional officers. I think that was the right way to go. And they need to be the kind of officers that are going to be out in the field regularly looking for the bad guys, looking to protect us, our property, our lives, our homes, and not being so much having to do a lot of paperwork and transporting or doing other things that keep them from being out on the roadways protecting individual neighborhoods.
On top of that hiring plan, which is already in motion, I want to say it's a 5-year plan, started 2 years ago. Would you still want to expand the force beyond that?
I think I'd have to see that. And I'm sorry that it's taking us 5 years. I originally hoped that we could do it in 3, but we've run into some budget difficulties that have kind of changed our ability to go ahead and add another 150 police officers this year or whatever. So I don't know that I would say we would need to add at the end of this period of time, but I think we need to continue to look because the community is growing every year. 20,000, 22, 25,000 projections for new people coming to the city of San Antonio. And when you add the population, you need to consider, do we have to modify our services? Do we have to add? Do we have to change somehow in order to make sure that everybody who comes and everybody who stays has the kind of service they need from all the different city departments? So sometimes it means expanding. Sometimes it means changing the focus from one department to another to kind of back each other up, so to speak. But I'll wait until we get those police officers out there on the job and what they're doing and its effect on the crime rate that we have in the city.
All right, so this is actually one of the favorite questions to be asked on this particular show. Many small businesses in San Antonio have suffered through the boondoggle of street repairs, i.e., St. Mary's Strip, Broadway, and Alamo Streets. As mayor, how would you improve the process to alleviate messes like these?
Well, I will say that we're already looking at that in depth. I sit on the city's planning commission, and we've been looking at how we can better address growth. That's what we're really talking about, and specifically growth downtown. I think we really haven't done a good job of managing that growth. For example, I look at Market Street. Market Street has been torn up since I've been on council. And it's consistently more development that's coming up, and they want to do something on this part of the street, and somebody else wants to do something on the other end of the street, and then that crosses another street, and all of a sudden we've got construction all around downtown, which is really prohibiting people from coming down. It's discouraging people who live in all parts of the city, and it hurts a lot of local businesses. What I believe is we need to have a more comprehensive organization. I would call it a council made up of many of the different departments that are involved in development. For example, the the Developmental Services Department, the Planning Commission, the Zoning Commission. They should be more involved in discussions on what's going on with development in the city, with Public Works, with SAWS, with CPS, with TxDOT. All of those act together one way or another in development that goes on all around downtown and in other parts of the city. But they don't all sit together and share what's going on, what they're seeing as difficulties, what they see coming down the road in 6 months or a year. We need to be able to look forward in development so that we can hopefully get all of the different organizations to work together to try and make it more efficient and effective and not have such a poor effect on local businesses.
So would the practical product of this council be a schedule that actually makes sense, that where you don't have overlapping street projects that are choking downtown currently?
Well, I would hope so, but also we have to recognize that Texas is a very strong property rights state. If a developer comes in and they buy a building and they want to rehabilitate that building, they're going to do that. If there's a lot that's a parking lot that somebody wants to turn into a hotel, they're going to do that. But I think we can do better in collaboration and coordination of scheduling those things so that they're done in a way that doesn't have as much of an adverse effect on businesses. It's always going to affect someone. But I think we need better coordination in order to make it work better for the community and the small businesses as well as the developer. So it's going to have to be a partnership and a collaborative effort. And I think bringing together the stakeholders that are involved in this will help us in that direction.
Right.
Who right now do you think is to blame for kind of this construction mess downtown?
I don't know that I could say there's a department or anything to blame, because I don't believe we've looked at the fact that the city is growing so much that we needed to collaborate more to make sure that growth was orderly, so to speak. But I think there may be the city itself to blame if we don't do more to make it more effective and efficient going forward. And that means bringing all the players, including private companies that plan on buying a piece of property and want to develop something, so that they can schedule what they want to do in conjunction with SAWS may have to do for the streets, or, any other organization that's involved in this has to do to make it work and not hurt the tourism and the business in downtown. And I say that in other places too. We see it in other parts of the city. Main roads getting shut down and taking forever to finish, and businesses being affected. And the communities doesn't really appreciate that. So we need to be better off at doing that.
Now, the city's got a relatively small scale grant program for businesses who have been hurt by road construction near their businesses. And there's a lot of criticism around that grant program. Is that an adequate response from the city, or should it do more?
Well, I think we should do more. I don't know that I would say we need to do X amount of dollars to go ahead and solve that. We need to plan better. We need to implement those plans better. We need to be more efficient so that those businesses aren't as adversely affected. We need to give them more of a heads up so they can plan better for whether it's staffing or product that they need to do their job. And so once I believe we come together with a stronger effort to coordinate the development going forward, then we can find out what are those holes that remain in the business community that the city may have a stronger role in filling.
Right. Just a quick question, follow up from one of our viewers on your idea of a kind of a broad council to kind of figure out the schedule for street projects. Would local organizations that reside in those areas around planned street projects be allowed to sit on this new council hemisphere, for example?
Well, I think that they need to be able to see what's going on and be well informed. And I think that they may have or should have an opportunity to say how they think it might affect their neighborhood or their community. I don't think it needs to be a kind of council of participants that is going to mandate It's really a matter of putting minds together and coming up with good long-term outlooks on how development can continue, be efficient and effective, and not have such an adverse effect on communities and businesses.
You're hosting your second gun buyback event next month. Police Chief McManus has expressed skepticism about the effectiveness of these events, and years of research hasn't provided conclusive evidence that they actually reduce gun violence. An SAPD officer was even fired after your first event last year for taking 2 shotguns that someone turned in. Given all this, why devote more money to this type of initiative?
Well, first of all, I don't call it a gun buyback. We're not buying anything. What we're doing is offering people an opportunity to exchange a weapon they no longer want or need to make their home safer. And in exchange, we're going to give them an H-E-B gift card that they may have some value in. Last time we did this, we had people turn in over 900 weapons that they no longer wanted in their home. And we had people who were waiting to go ahead and do more. We ran out of gift cards. So there was a greater interest than what actually turned out. And that's why we're doing this again. And let me just remind you my perspective on this. Every time you remove a weapon from a home, you're making that home safer. We just heard of, and this is in a vehicle, but we heard of a child shooting another child with a weapon in a vehicle. We hear all the time of children in homes finding weapons and discharging them, maybe hurting themselves or something else. We hear all the time of kids taking guns to school that came out of their homes. We hear too often of domestic violence where women are shot, and they're shot with weapons in those homes. We hear too often of former people who were in the military or did public service somehow, who are killing themselves with weapons in their homes. Anything this community can do to remove weapons from homes that people don't want, don't need, make their home less safe than they want it to be, then I think I'm doing a public service by promoting this. And it's all voluntary, has nothing to do with the Second Amendment. All it has to do is helping people keep their homes safe.
So at your last gun, we'll call it not a buyback. Gun exchange. That's fine. It attracted, apart from those who wanted to exchange guns for an H-E-B gift card, it also attracted gun buyers who were standing outside the event and paying people good money for their guns, defeating, I think, the purpose of what you were doing. Did you interact with any of the gun sellers? Did you approach any of them?
We did. We went up because a couple of them were filming what they were doing, and a couple of
there were a couple of YouTubers, and
a couple who were going up to different vehicles and tapping on the window. And we said, please don't bother people, but they have a First Amendment right to be on the sidewalk and talk with people and things like that. They're probably, out of the over 900 weapons we brought in, there probably weren't even a dozen that anyone was interested in selling. And maybe they were because they were getting more money. What worries me is, are there going to be other people trying to do something like that have no license, no right, that may want to get a weapon to use for the wrong kind of purposes? But that is not something that should deter us from allowing people who want to go ahead and remove the weapon from their home from doing that. And I predict we'll bring in more people who want to go ahead and dispose of those weapons this time than we did last time. We're hopefully going to be better prepared for that.
You're using your office's discretionary funds for this effort.
Some of that, yes.
If elected mayor, would you plan to continue these gun exchanges? And if so, how would you plan on funding them? Well,
I would like to continue and see those continue. And I would like to see the city as the form of government in this community protecting people, take it on as a citywide event and let the city fund it. Yes, using taxpayer dollars. So I would love to see that. And I hope that if we prove this to be a continuing success again this year, more and more people would say, that's a smart use of our tax dollars, because none of those weapons that we've taken in and will take in will ever be used to hurt somebody, to threaten somebody, to kill somebody, or to use in a crime, because they're all destroyed.
Now, we've got a question from a viewer that is a big question, and can't wait to see how you answer it. How do you plan to address poverty in San Antonio? And let me add to this. I'd like to actually kind of break this question down a little bit. So San Antonio's poverty rate is nearly 18%, and it's been fairly static. I mean, it's been bouncing. It goes up a few percentage points, it goes down a few percentage points, but we remain one of the poorest large cities in the country. What do you think the roots of that are, and what power does City Hall have to address those root problems of poverty that you're about to identify for us?
That's a fair question, and it's one I've thought of a lot. You know, I did a little research, and 30 years ago in this city, we had 200,000 people living in poverty. Today, we have 250,000 people living in poverty. So to my way of looking at it, we have not really moved the needle on helping overcome poverty in our community, and I think we need to. And I was a teacher for 25 years, and I taught in some of the poorest neighborhoods in San Antonio, and I was aware of children living in poverty and their families living in poverty. And so I think that through the education process, we can do more as a city. I think, for example, the state has neglected totally funding public education the way it should. One of the proposals floating around in City Hall is, can we go ahead and set aside some funding to help teachers buy a home, to be able to stay in the school system and teach our children? I think education is really a key to poverty. When people feel like they have an education, that they have a tool that they can use to better their lives, then they're more motivated to do that. And so, education's a big part of that. Public health is a big part of that. I'm about to launch, and I'll be doing that in about 2 weeks, an effort to help reduce the healthcare debt in this city. And I think it's going to have a major impact on the lives of some people. But healthcare is another key issue for poverty in our city. Again, the state refused to expand Medicare or Medicaid, and they refused to take $10 or $11 billion a year to help people who are struggling with healthcare. So the city needs to do some things that we may be able to step up and help with healthcare. We've got a problem with young people in the city who do not have opportunities or feel like they don't have an opportunity. So they don't stay in school. They find other young people that they share some common interest in. And a lot of times they turn to things that we don't want them doing in this community rather than continuing their education or getting a reasonable job to take care of their own needs. And so we see a lot of youth crime in our city today. And I say that the vast majority of that is really tied to poverty. And so until we address poverty by helping people with education and healthcare and housing, we have a real problem with housing in the city. And I've served on the San Antonio Committee for Housing, and I realize that we need to provide, as a city, as a community, and partnership with the business, more affordable housing for people to live in. If you don't have a roof over your head, or if you think you're going to have to move out again because you don't have the money to pay the rent, then it just leads to more confusion for families and greater challenges to getting out of poverty. So I think that is a very major concern, and housing is an important part of it. Healthcare is an important part of it. Education is an important part of it. I think the city can take a greater role in each of those things. But I wish the state would step up and do that too.
You just had a couple weeks ago, 4 of your council colleagues vote against an affordable housing project. It killed the project. What would you do as mayor to get everyone on that council on board with affordable housing plans?
I don't know if you'll ever get everybody on board for a particular affordable housing project, but I think the housing plan we have as a city, I think every council member will tell you they support it. But once you start telling that council member that somebody wants to do that in your district, in your part of town, then you start hearing from your neighbors who have a different point of view about what should be on the other side of their fence. It just becomes a big challenge. I have to say I made a mistake a few years ago as a councilman when the people in my community told me they did not want to have an affordable project built in District 9. And I really thought it was worthwhile. But the more I talked to people in my community, I said oftentimes, I'm a neighborhood kind of guy, and I want to respect the neighborhood. So I opposed it. But the rest of the council, in their wisdom, voted for it, and that project got built. And I've come to understand the value that it is putting into our community. And I've supported probably 4 other affordable housing projects in District 9 since I've been on the council.
How many since that vote where you voted no?
Well, we haven't had, all of them. That was one of the first ones. So I might have supported one before, but at least 3 out of the others I've supported since then, and with the objection from people in the community. But my philosophy is people should be able to live near where they work. And when you look at like this project on Nacogdoches Road in District 10, there's a lot of businesses along there. They employ a lot of people. They're not paying them $20, $25 an hour. They're paying them $12 or $13 or $15 an hour. And you shouldn't have to commute from the south side of town to get out to Nacogdoches Road to get paid $12 or $13 an hour when we can build affordable housing that they could walk to work. And it's the same in other major places in San Antonio. And so that's kind of the philosophy I've taken on. Now, it's not to say that we shouldn't have responsible development, that we shouldn't be making sure that as much as we need to, we protect the integrity of the property owners who live around those properties. But I think there's ways of doing it. And I'll tell you, of the projects that have been built in District 9, I have not heard anyone come back to me after they've been built and people have moved in and say, boy, that was a mistake. Boy, this is all kinds of trouble. It's fear of the unknown, I think, that keeps a lot of people from supporting, affordable housing in their neighborhoods.
Right. So you mentioned, you've talked about your support for affordable housing and for SHIP, the city's affordable housing plan. Yet, on September 12th, you voted in favor of a memorandum of understanding between the city, Bexar County, and designated bidder, the owner of the San Antonio missions, right. Which will set in motion not only the construction of a new baseball stadium, but the demolition of soap factory apartments. Right. Which is more than 350 units of what is fairly affordable housing right downtown. It's one of the least expensive options. How can you justify that vote given your support of both CHIP and affordable housing?
I really thought about it a lot, and it was probably one of the most challenging decisions I made. And I had to weigh it in a lot of different ways. First of all, the property was owned by the people who wanted to develop the stadium. And as I said earlier, Texas is a very strong property rights state. And people have the right to do things with property they own. And almost all land around there had been bought by the development team that wanted to build the stadium. I'm a baseball fan too. I've gone out and watched Mission games. They've been part of our community for, years and years. They've undergone a few changes here and there, but a lot of people feel that's an important part of our community. Not as important as the Spurs, but certainly to many people it was. Now, yes, those apartments were affordable for the people who are living there. Some of those people I know have lived there 15 or 20 years, which made it really the hardest decision for me. But I also looked at the fact that no one is being asked to move out in 3 months or 6 months or 9 months. Mm-hmm. No one should be having to move out for at least a year, many of them for 2 years, and the last group of them for 3 years before they'd literally be asked to move out. So I felt like there was a lot of time. I'll use this as an example too. I've lived in San Antonio for 53 years. Mm-hmm. I've lived in 11 different places in the city of San Antonio in 53 years, including houses I've rented, apartments I've rented, houses I've owned. We're a pretty mobile society in general. A lot of the people living there now are fairly young. Some had just moved in. Yes, it's affordable. And yes, the opportunity for finding something else affordable is a big challenge for those who may need to move. But also, the development team has committed to providing resources to help people make those moves. They're offering them a different place to live that would be as affordable if they have to move right away. And they've offered to pay significant expenses for each family that may need to move. And then the other way I measured it in the long run was there are 350 or so individuals or families that may need to relocate. But the developers are going to build an asset to the city where 5 or 6 or 7,000 people are going to go to 70 or 80 games a year. So we're talking about tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people every year for the next 5, 10, 20 years that get the benefit of that stadium downtown, as opposed to 350 families that may need to relocate.
Right. And during that meeting, you directly addressed the residents who were on hand from soap factory, and you said it's not fair to you, but we have to consider the right decision for the entire community. And I think that's in the same spirit of what you've just kind of described.
Right.
But with this project, it was, I think, clear from the very beginning that designated bidders, the team owner, would be seeking public financing to build the stadium. So why couldn't the city have gotten involved earlier on to make sure that a location was selected that didn't require the elimination of affordable housing?
Well, we didn't know where they'd want to go until they decided where they wanted to go. And personally, I don't think the city should be paying for the stadium. And I say that now because I don't believe we are. What's going to pay for that stadium is something I've believed in since I've been on council, and that is growth, economic growth.
Right.
Growth pays for growth. They intend on doing a lot of development around that stadium, including a hotel, including more housing, including restaurants, all of which will raise the value of those properties significantly, will provide more revenue to the city, and that revenue is going to be used to pay for the stadium. Right. So it's the growth that's going to pay for that, not your or mine individual tax dollars.
Right. It's worth pointing out, though, that we are talking about tax dollars. I mean, these are funds that would go into the city's general fund, but it's not doing that.
I disagree. These are funds we would never get because the project didn't get developed, and it would just be vacant land for more years until somebody else came along and wanted to develop something. Right. But it's new money that is coming from the development that they're spending millions of dollars to develop. And so I thought that was a fair exchange. I have always said, and I believe it when we think about the Spurs coming forward, I don't believe the city should be paying for somebody's stadium or arena. Now, we can support with infrastructure, streets or lighting or traffic controls, because we need to take care of public safety and public transportation. And I believe this is a project that is paying for itself through the builders and developers. The avenue is through tax dollars that we receive, but we'd never get it if they weren't doing the building.
Now, there's a lot of academic research that shows that stadiums just don't add a lot to a local economy. Do you look at the baseball stadium and potentially a Spurs arena as an economic benefit for the city, or is it something, for the community?
I think you find that most of that research says it wasn't of an economic benefit to the city that paid millions of dollars to build it. Now we're talking about the developers paying millions of dollars to build it. From that perspective, if they're going to continue to expand around those stadiums and put in restaurants or hotels or apartment complexes or commercial enterprises that are going to generate revenue to the city, then we win. It's a positive for the city. That's why I say I'm not for spending city tax dollars. Let the developers do it. Let us receive the benefit of that. And if part of that benefit pays off some of the cost then I think it's a win for the city.
So looking ahead, looking ahead, assuming, there is going to be some agreement between the city, potentially the county and the Spurs to build a new arena at Hemisphere, that probably almost certainly will include public funding. If it's not public funding through a tax increment reinvestment zone, a CHRS, would you not support it then?
I would say that if it says, if there's a proposal that the city is going to use city tax dollars to build an arena for the Spurs, I'd say, no, I'm not going to support that. Now, if they say, we're going to build the arena and we're going to build some other things, can the city help redirect traffic and do something about streets or lighting or sidewalks? The kind of responsibility a city has, I'd be all for that, even if it meant we'd spend a few millions of dollars doing that. Now, if the Spurs, and right now we don't have anything on the table. I know that there have been a lot of reports that there's some kind of non-disclosure agreements out there. I'll tell you.
Want to ask you about those.
We'll
get to our next question.
Okay, but getting to the Spurs. If we could come up with a similar kind of an agreement we have with the stadium, I would support it because the growth that they build up front before we turn a shovel on the new ball stadium, they're going to be building some of the infrastructure.
So you see it as kind of a model?
Yeah, that's exactly what I see it. But also, there's an opportunity for a partnership with the state to use some state growth in hotel taxes that would pay for this as well. So there's a partnership, I think, that can be developed that would not involve city tax dollars, but would involve infrastructure support, state money coming in, and the developers putting in what they need to put into to be able to build that stadium or that arena.
So speaking of the NDAs, you told us this spring that you were okay with the use of NDAs as the city plans Project Marvel. That's its code name for $1 billion sports and entertainment district that could include the Spurs Arena, expanded convention center, remodeled Alamo Dome. When do you think it would be appropriate to loop the public in and start having public conversations about this project?
Yeah. Let me say, I don't recall if I used the word NDA or if somebody had asked me about using that term when we talked, but I've always believed that you have to have the privacy of negotiation when you're talking about development. And the simple thing is, if you start saying we're going to develop X over there, then everybody and his brother is going to be trying to get a piece of it by buying up all the property around there, raising the cost of development, and making it risky for a development to move forward. So I believe there's a proper role for behind-the-scenes negotiations. When should it be public? When there's the potential of an agreement. And right now, I'll tell you very frankly, and I asked very directly, both the mayor and the city manager, is there any kind of non-discrimination,
disclosure?
No ordinance saying that we can't say anything. And they said, no, we have not signed any kind of non-disclosure agreement. The city manager hasn't, the mayor hasn't. So I don't know who else has. I haven't. And I think it's speculation.
We've had
developers may have, but that's what they do in order.
I think the president is under an NDA.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's disingenuous of them to say that no, of course we're not doing it because the city manager or mayor hasn't. Maybe they haven't, but a deputy city manager, Lori Houston, definitely. She's been.
I'll have to ask her. She's one I haven't asked. Fair question.
We have a response to an open records request from a year ago showing her actively pushing NDAs on potential parties that would be involved in not necessarily the Spurs stadium, but in what's known as Project Marvel, this kind of big sports and entertainment district.
Yeah, and it really involves a lot of the tourism and potential more development around the city. But as far as the area around where Spurs Arena may go, there is, to my understanding, no plan that has been given to the city. No, we want to do this by X year, and this is what we want to do, how many seats. That hasn't come forward yet. And I think they realize they're still locked in that county contract for a while. They'd be putting themselves at pretty great risk probably at coming out with anything definitive this early. But until they do, to me, it's speculation. And I still stand by what I said. I wouldn't put a penny into the city funding for those kinds of sports arenas and things.
Before we move on, I also would just want to point out, you'd mentioned non-disclosure agreements making sense if the idea is you're sitting next to a lot of private property that could be snatched up by speculators. You don't want that.
Yeah.
In this case, I mean, like there's very little. We're talking about Hemisphere, which is bounded by the Alamo Dome and the convention center. Like that's all publicly owned property. Like it's not. But
we don't have any plan. No details has been presented. So what can we talk about?
Right. All right. This is a radical shift in gears. We're moving on to our dangerous dog problem in the city of San Antonio.
Yes.
Brought into really sharp relief last year by the death of 2 residents from dog mauling.
Yeah.
This is a question from one of our viewers. I believe Shannon Sims, who is he departed as director of animal care services back in June, was very effective and asked for what he needed. He is no longer with ACS. The city is now looking for a new director. Right. What would you like to see in a new director of ACS? And what do you think the council can do to further support animal care services?
Well, I think we need to find somebody who has the experience that we have been going through as part of their life's work in animal care services, so that they may bring to us some ideas that they've found in other communities that they've implemented in other communities to make those communities safer. Maybe we won't find somebody with that much experience, but I hope that's first and foremost what we're looking for. And I'm sure there are other communities who have had similar problems than ours. Maybe not as big as San Antonio, though. Being the 7th largest city, we probably have the 7th largest problems in the country. But that, I think, is a prerogative. I mean, an imperative that we need to undertake. And the city, well, I don't think a lot of people realize how much money the city invests, not just the city, but all of the different nonprofit organizations. It's probably $40-50 million a year related to animal care, animal services, adoptions, and things of that nature. And I don't think it's made a lot of impact. I think the biggest ingredient missing is individual animal owners' personal responsibility. And I think the city needs to do a better job of educating our community about those responsibilities. I was a pet owner for years. I don't have a dog right now, but I love animals, love dogs, had 3 of them. They've all passed. It's a difficult situation when it happens. But I think that you've got to understand that there's a responsibility that goes with pet ownership, and too many people don't understand that. And children don't understand that. We need to help the kids understand the responsibility of pet ownership. Kids are going to say, I want a puppy, I want a dog. And then 2 years later, I don't want to take the dog out. I don't want to clean up that mess. Dogs get bigger, and I've had them, and they dig under the fence and they get out and they get away. Well, if you have them spayed and neutered, that'll have a big effect on slowing that kind of behavior down, which is going to keep the pets in their homes, in their property. And those kinds of things, I think the city needs to take a stronger role on.
How would it take a stronger role in educating? I'm thinking of adults, adults in my neighborhood who are not responsible dog owners. How does the city do that, particularly when ACS can't even get to a call in a timely manner to see the dog violating city code?
Yeah. Well, there are more pets in the city than there are criminals. And so unless we want to go ahead and make ACS bigger than SAPD, we're always going to have the problem of trying to get there and be there when something happens. So I don't know what a solution may be for that more than education. And I think holding people responsible if they're not being responsible themselves with fining people who are not being responsible pet owners. And I wouldn't want to see that happen to anybody. And like I said, I've had dogs, they've dug their way out, they've gotten out, I've had to chase them down, and I didn't know they were gone till I got home from work. Sure, that happens to me. Well, give me a warning, let me do a better job. Sometimes it took me 2 or 3 times to get that dog to stop digging under that fence and getting away. But there are so many dogs that are dangerous. Too many dangerous dogs in our community. And we have to enforce personal accountability as much as we can. I hope everybody who owns a pet will be responsible on their own. And if something happens and their animal gets out, hopefully that animal is going to be friendly and come up and want to play with you and not bite you. But, it's still going to be a large problem. I think we need to continue researching what other cities are doing. We need to get somebody to come in as a director who understands the problem through experience and can help us find more ways of dealing with it.
All right. From one of our viewers, as a council member, neither you nor your colleagues have given the city's own. Oh, that's weird. Hold on. The city's own disability access officer authority to correct city violations of the ADA and the Texas Architectural Barriers Act. What would you do as mayor to stop the city itself from discriminating against residents who have disabilities?
Well, I think that's a good point to bring up to my attention, something I wasn't aware of. Mm-hmm. And it's hard to be aware of everything, but I would say that we should have the authority for city officers to do what they need to uphold city ordinance. If that means giving somebody in the disability office more authority to point out problems structurally and to cite people to correct those problems, then I think we should be looking at that. I know that there's a lot of situations in the city where people with disabilities, particularly mobility disabilities, are having a hard time getting around. I see it in all kinds of neighborhoods. Part of what we're doing in the city is trying to improve sidewalk usage by setting up a separate independent effort to go ahead and work with property owners to correct sidewalk deficiencies in front of their homes. Used to be the city just said, sidewalk's your responsibility. We're assuming more responsibility to help in that area. I think that when it comes to public transportation, we need to make sure we work closely with VIA and even with some of the private organizations, whether it's Lyft or Uber, to make sure part of their charge is to be able to deal with people who have disabilities, particularly disabilities, to get them around. And I think we can look at some of those issues. I would love this person to contact my office, make an appointment, come by and sit down and help me understand more about it. I've got a person I've had on the Council Disability Committee for several years, Mr. Martinez, and he keeps me informed and he's very active, but there's a lot of different types of disabilities probably that it would benefit me or anyone who's going to be mayor to understand more about.
A September poll from UTSA showed that you had the most support among likely voters at 9%. But
9.2%.
Not that you pay attention to the polls, of course.
Most of the respondents, 43%, said they weren't familiar with any of the candidates that included you. How do you plan to overcome that in the next few months before the May election?
It's a matter of talking with the community, getting out there, letting them see me, hear me, ask me questions, holding activities and events that'll bring people together to learn more about it. But that's what everybody needs to do who's running. And so I expect that we'll be seeing a lot more of that. I took a step back over the last month or so because there's been so much energy into the national elections and the state and local elections that are partisan. The good thing about being on the city council, I believe, is that it's nonpartisan. And so I can easily tell somebody there's no Democratic or Republican way of filling a pothole or fixing a light on the street. And I think people are much more open-minded to listen to anyone who's running for any office from the city perspective, since it's nonpartisan. So it just made sense to me to kind of step back from what was going on in that area and to allow that to settle and then start making those efforts to become better known and to express more of what I would like to do as mayor. The next mayor of San Antonio has a lot of things to consider. You know, we talked about safety. The next mayor needs to know more about public housing, public health, about infrastructure. There's a lot to learn. There's a lot to know. And it takes a lot of experience. I've got 7.5 years of it. So I think I'm ready to move on, but I still need to let people know that. And it's hard. There's probably going to be over 200,000 eligible voters in Bexar County. Well, in the city, 1 million anyway. And there's no way I'm going to get to 1 million people. But I'll tell you what, I wish 60, 70% of them would vote in city elections. I'd never argue with an election if we had 70 or 80% of the people vote, because I know the majority of people have always made the right decision. But when you've got in city elections, 15%, 12%, in my district, we've had 20%, which I feel good about. But, it's just a challenge getting out to a lot of people and letting them know. And I haven't raised a lot of money. I don't anticipate raising a lot of money. I've always had a hard time believing that money should be what gets people elected, but I also realize what politics are like. So, I've had to do what I can to get elected.
That's easy to say if you have the name that sounds like a superhero, John. I mean, you got it's a good name. It's a good name to have in politics. So last couple of questions, and we thank you for your time. You've been very generous with it.
Sure.
We have viewers who want to know what your position is on Prop C. This is the city charter amendment that is on the November 5th ballot. It would remove the salary and tenure caps on San Antonio's city manager. He's going to go out on a limb and say, maybe you support it, maybe not.
Well, we've talked about this from the council's perspective. Whenever there's charter issues, should the council get involved and start saying yay or nay? When they affect us and what we do and how we do our job, I kind of feel like I'd rather leave it up to the citizens to educate themselves and learn and make their own decision. So I won't directly answer that question, but I will say this, and I've said this since I've been on the council after a year or two. I believe we have the most professional administration that we could have in this city. From top to bottom, I've never had a problem dealing with any city administrator in any department from the city manager on down. I think they've been responsive. They've wanted to do what they believe was right. Sometimes I don't agree with them. And, my biggest way of getting through disagreements is to ask why. When they tell me we can't do this, I say, why? And when they say, well, we can't do this because of that, and I say, why? And when they say, well, we can't do this because of that, I say, well, why not? And eventually they kind of understand what I think we need. And they come around to helping me get those things done. Okay. Because I can't tell a city staffer what to do. That's not my job. But I can ask questions, and I do with city staff, and they're very professional from top to bottom.
Now, there's another city charter amendment. There are 6 in total. One of them would increase pay for the mayor and city council members. It is your paycheck. Is this something you can talk about? I mean, you don't want to talk about Prop C. How about this one?
No comment.
Okay. How about, I'm trying to remember the discussion from council back in August. Didn't you take a position on this? Did you not?
I did when it was theoretical.
Okay. Well, what was it theoretically?
Well, I think that the city deserves people who are ready, willing, and able to serve on council. But there's a lot that goes into people being ready, willing, and able. And part of it has to be their personal economic condition. And I think that's worth people thinking about in this election. And that's, if you're going to have the best people you can find, then you've got to realize that it's a lot for them to do that kind of work. And no one does anything today for free. There's always some kind of reward or compensation in there somewhere.
All right. Councilman John Courage, thank you very much for joining us. And thank you for watching. And we will see you for the next In Vivo. Thanks a lot.